So, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Slowly, people are getting in. I see. Please make yourself comfortable. Make sure to have something to drink, so you're ready for the next 1.5 hours. You see the slide of the speakers on screen. And there is tech support also. If there is a technical issue, you can connect with Hanna Kabelka from ShareNet. Well, actually, then you can send her a message in the chat. I expect, well, I don't expect, let's knock on wood, but I don't expect any technical glitches, I think, because we're so used to working online nowadays. If I hope everyone has their name and organization on their connection so that people know who's online with us. And we hope people can put their cameras on so we can see one another. I'm waiting a little bit longer because I still see the number of participants going up. It's great. We're already at 37 at this point, 38. That's really good. Okay. Well, we are 40 now. I think it's a good moment to start. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Community of Practice on Multilateral Processes of ShareNet. The title of our meeting is Generation Equality Forum in Paris, Reflections and Opportunities for Gender Equality and SRHR Advocates. As I think you all know, I'm Yvonne Bogaarts. I'm manager advocacy at Rutgers, and I will be your chairperson for this session. Welcome, everyone. I'm accompanied by Hanna Kabelka. Hanna will be our tech host for today from ShareNet. And well, if you have a problem, you can contact Hanna in the chat. As some of you might have seen, we will actually record this meeting. The recording will be used for preparing a short report afterwards. And we want to put it on the ShareNet YouTube channel to enable people who cannot join today to watch it on a later moment. We are recording in speaker view. So that means as long as you don't speak, you will not be visible. So as long as you keep yourself on mute, you won't be recorded. So no worries there. If there's still someone who objects to the recording, also please inform Hanna about that in the chat. The chat, obviously, we want to make this as participatory meeting as possible. We invite you to use the chat for questions and reactions. Okay, I think we're all set now, and I'd like to kick off and try to set the scene about the Generation Equality Forum. The Generation Equality Forum was a global meeting to celebrate, or maybe better, to take stock of what has happened since the Beijing Platform for Action was adopted in '95, and since its conferences every 5 years after. And it was meant to accelerate progress on the issues we all care about. It was organized by UN Women, co-hosted with Mexico and France. The forum was actually intended to take place last year, but postponed because of COVID to this year. It was basically a virtual meeting, except for several bobos who could attend a live session in Paris. Oh, how I wished I was there. And I know we could fill the next 1.5 hours with complaints about the unclear process, the lack of access, the time frame, which didn't fit the time frame of activists in the Pacific or in Latin America. We can complain about all the technical glitches. If you used the chat, you were kicked out of meetings, etc., etc. However, I prefer to focus on the content. What was said on accelerating progress? What commitments were made? And how can the work and the outcome support actually the work that lays ahead to reach a gender equality? The themes of the Generation Equality Forum were divided into 6 different action coalitions, the Youth Taskforce, and the Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action. Each action coalition was led by a multi-stakeholder group consisting of governments, foundations, civil society actors, private sector, UN organizations. And each action coalition came with a set of concrete and ambitious actions, the so-called blueprint. So Action Coalition 3, for instance, the Action Coalition on Bodily Autonomy and SRHR. This Action Coalition wants to deliver transformational change through 4 actions. The first one on increasing delivery of comprehensive sexuality education. The second one is on SRHR services related to universal health coverage, to access to contraceptive services, and to safe and legal abortion. The third is about empowering all people, including 260 million more girls, adolescents, women in all their diversity, to make autonomous decisions about their bodies, sexuality, and reproduction. And the fourth action is around increasing accountability to feminist and women's organizations, women human rights defenders, and peace builders. And then each of these 4 actions are again worked out a bit further in more detail. During the forum, these action coalitions were presented, and there was space for all those stakeholders wanting to make commitments to the specific action coalition. So if talking about Action Coalition 3 on SRHR and bodily autonomy, there was, of course, a commitment from UNFPA. There were donors. There was the Children Investment Fund Foundation. There was a commitment from Melinda Gates on behalf of the Gates Foundation. And the Gates Foundation in total committed 2.1 billion of new money overall to various action coalitions, but was a substantial amount for Action Coalition 3. There was the World Bank, there was civil society, there were women, network of women with disabilities, indigenous women, IPPF, the Youth Coalition. There was a whole list of countries, including the Netherlands, who made commitments, a number of European countries, as well as Burkina Faso, Argentina, and the USA. And Japan also made a commitment, although they didn't speak. There was no country, and that struck me actually from Asia, and I would say overall there was very little participation from Asian governments. And there was a commitment from one private sector partner from CLUE, and CLUE is from the menstrual cycle tracking app. I think it was quite a bit boring to be very honest, to have statement after statement. Well, you know how these UN meetings go. But there was, to make it more lively, there were 4 videos. including on bodily autonomy, the right to CSE, safe and legal abortion, and on trans Jews, which I think were very inclusive and diverse in nature. We will hear more about the other action coalitions, the Youth Voice and the Compact during this session. All in all, UN Women announced that the Generation Equality Forum had raised $40 billion and that it came with a bold action-oriented agenda. And we will hear more about that through the next 4 speakers on the different subjects, followed by a Q&A and discussion moderated by Nadia from Linde from Women Equals Men. So rules for today: if you're not a speaker, keep your microphone on mute, then you won't be recorded also. And if you want to react, please do so in the chat. And use the chat actively. I think that can help sharpen the discussion. Well, I see we are with 48 people online now. Great to have so many. Welcome to you all. And it's my pleasure now to announce the first speaker, which is Mori Plaschinski, who is the Advocacy Coordinator of Choice for Youth and Sexuality. Mori will tell us more about youth participation, both in the run-up to and during the JEF and the envisioned follow-up. Please, Mori, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Hello, good morning. Well, I will start by sharing my screen because I would like to show you some amazing pictures that are outcomes of the youth discussions that we had both before and during the JEF. So give me a second. Here we go. I hope that you can see it clearly. So yeah, as Yvonne said, I will talk about the youth participation during the JEF, including the preparation with the Young Feminists on Conference, and then the actions taken to mobilize during the JEF. And for all the youth constituencies of the JEF, we believe that the Generation Equality Forum clearly acknowledges the importance and the crucial role of young people to achieve the ambitious objectives that the JEF has. And the key importance of young people for the implementation of the JEF objectives. And we truly see that they want to achieve this. However, the implementation of meaningful youth participation has fallen behind the youth expectations. It was mainly in the sense of youth leadership and co-ownership, feminist leadership, intersectionality, transformative design and leadership, and power dynamics. So during the process preparing for JEF, all of these issues starting to arrive, especially among the youth task force, the national gender youth advocates, the youth co-leads of the different action coalitions, and as well youth-led organizations at networks across the globe. So after Mexico and in the way to Paris, we saw a crucial need to strengthen youth movements and also to advance collective youth-led advocacy before and during Paris. During this moment, the Young Feminist Manifesto was written as a way to express the concerns of young people regarding the lack of clarity of youth engagement during the JEF, and also giving some specific recommendations on how to move forward. I believe this was a crucial moment for youth participation at the JEF, and it clearly stated youth's opinions and youth needs in order to move forward. As well, the implementation of the recommendations of the Young Feminist Manifesto was a little bit disappointing. And taking all of this into consideration, it was a moment where the different youth constituencies of the JEF, together with youth activists from around the world, decided to organize something else, to mobilize together. And that's the moment where the Young Feminists on Conference emerged. This, that we call an on conference, was a 100% autonomous youth-led platform. And it happened during the 11th, 12th, and 13th of June. And I think this is a great example of how young people can organize together and create a transformative and meaningful space. We had around 2,000 young people between the ages of 12 and 35 joining. And with that large number of participants, we managed to make it an inclusive and participatory space. We really wanted to avoid the webinar style. We really wanted to avoid it being a moment where people speak, the other people listen, and there's no interaction. So we developed together a methodology that allowed all the young people to actually be involved and be part of the process. So the lead principles of this event were co-ownership, co-leadership, and co-creation. And I think we really managed to get amazing results. This was a moment that offered a safe space for young people to express their concerns and also discuss their priorities for the coming JEF. It was a network space where young people could prepare joint advocacy strategies. And also the Action Coalition's young leaders offered a youth-friendly information on the content of the blueprints. And that way, young people from around the world could be informed of what actually the blueprints were saying, and also produce recommendations for the implementation of the blueprints. We had an amazing graphic recorder all through the process, monitoring and recording everything that was happening. So I'm showing here the image, and you can see all the different discussions that we had during the conference. Also, we have a space for explaining the commitment-making process that young people could understand it, and also network to take action together and make joint commitments. We have over 500 young people that asked for support to write their own commitments. And even if we know that it was a confusing process, a challenging process, young people were really interested in seeing how with their youth-led networks and organizations could commit to accelerate gender equality in the coming years. Therefore, we created a youth commitment catalog with all these 500 young people from across the world. And also we had a safe space for adolescents to share and push for their demands and what they wanted to see at the forum. So I think this adolescent-led dialogue was really changing, participatory, and it really made a statement of how young girls and adolescents from the age of 12 could be part of these processes and could influence as well the outcomes of the process. And as a conclusion, we believe that the Young Feminism Conference was a transformative feminist space and process focused on centering the voices and experiences of young feminists. And for me, it's a clear example that a youth-led world is possible and that young people are the experts of their own experiences, their lives, and their rights. And this showed that there's a lot of value in youth-led movements. And as well, that young people have the knowledge and capacity to lead a 100% self-organized event that is meaningful, that is participatory, and that really connects young people to action. From there, we move to Paris, and we arrive with lots of expectations, lots of plans, and ways to mobilize together. During the forum, together with the Young Feminist Hub and Youth Coalition, we organized daily youth checkouts, where the young people that were participating in the forum could get together and talk about the main outcomes of the day. And these are the graphic recorders that we have for each of the days. I will show you the rest. And I think those were really important spaces, as during the JEF, we didn't have much opportunity to actually connect and discuss what was going on. And then, of course, we all know about the technical issues. And for the young people participating in the JEF, the technical issues, they are not just something that happens. It's not just a mistake. It's not something that we have to be patient with. The phrase that came during the second day of the youth checkouts is that a technical issue is a political issue, because if people cannot participate, if they cannot know what's going on, if they cannot hear the action coalitions, they cannot hear the statements and the commitments, then it's not participatory. And we truly believe that this is not something that should go without attention, and that technical issues are important. And that was something that really frustrated the youth constituencies of the JEF, and also the young feminists with disabilities that couldn't access the platform at all. And then we, as the youth leaders of the JEF, we wrote a letter asking and demanding this to be fixed, which wasn't solved during the JEF. So what we decided to do on the last day was to start live streaming the sessions. We created Zoom links and started disseminating along all the youth WhatsApp groups that we had, Facebook groups, and we managed young people to be able to watch what was going on during the forum. And I think this is an example of youth leading by example, because we managed to successfully and proactively find a solution to a major problem that was not addressed at the moment. And this way, young people were able to actually participate. So I think it's an amazing way to find solutions. And then, well, yeah, I won't go deeper into all the different challenges that we're presenting for young people, because we think that, I think that all of us live that. The difficulties that happened during the opening ceremony, where young people were invited to participate and they did amazing speeches, but then they were sent back home after the opening ceremony. And we believe that that was totally tokenistic and it was unacceptable, because then they were just there for the picture, for the opening ceremony, and they couldn't even participate in the other days of the forum because they were flying back home. So there were lots of things that were not right for meaningful youth participation. And now we're creating a statement that we will disseminate in social media and also proposing some solutions for this. So what is the way to work forward towards a more inclusive and participatory process in the years ahead? We believe co-leadership and co-ownership are crucial, having decision-making power and agenda setting, accountability, having a detailed and concrete plan about what will be youth meaningful participation and implementation of the action coalitions, and also to address the accessibility issues, because they are important. Then also having substantive and meaningful participation, addressing why not all regions were included, why feminists with disabilities were not including, and make sure to have a youth-friendly process. Then funding and resourcing as well. There were a lot of issues with the resources reaching the youth Taskforce. So we would like to think together of ways to have youth-friendly funding and make those resources available. And finally, mutual capacity strengthening. We're now developing a toolkit or a manual explaining how we developed the Young Feminists on Conference and why it was successful. So also we can share this with the different JEF organizers and see how we can move forward towards a more meaningful platform. So these are the main points that came out of the youth checkouts and that we would like to keep discussing over the coming months and building an accountability mechanism for the JEF. Great, so I will stop sharing my screen now, and then at the end, if you have any questions in the Q&A session, I will be happy to discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mori, for this very interesting contribution. It has been a bumpy road, to say the least, and for me, this also shows youth were actually leading by example, and I think you've done great work in the run-up to and during the forum, and hopefully now also in the accountability mechanisms, and that's really fantastic. I would now like to introduce our second speaker, Karin Weber. Karin is the Senior Policy Advisor of the Taskforce on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. And Karin, I'm really interested to hear about your reflections on the Generation Equality Forum overall, on Action Coalition 6 also specifically, the Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership, which was led, where in the Netherlands was one of the members leading this Action Coalition, the commitments made, well, and what you see as the next step. Please, Karin, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Yvonne, and good morning, everyone. Really happy to be here and see everyone. I think the last time was the debrief after the CSW, and we already talked about Jeff Perez. So let me start on a positive note. I think in terms of making history, Jeff was really a very impressive forum. 26 years after Beijing, it really made history in terms of mobilizing $40 billion of investment for gender equality and women's rights. And it's really remarkable to realize that nearly half of that came from private sector and philanthropy, which is something that in the entire history of the multilateral processes, we've never seen this. So that's really a very positive thing to see. Nearly 50,000 people participating, even though we very much underscore all the technical issues that Mori also mentioned. Having 94 youth-led organizations making commitments, 440 civil society organizations, packed agenda of 3 days, Generation Equality Forum Paris with 110 events taking place. It's really also a pivotal moment for gender equality. Of course, it's 26 years after Beijing. It's not 25 because of the pandemic. At the same time, really, it's such an important moment to really stress the importance of a gender transformative approach to the recovery of the COVID-19 pandemic. So in that sense, the postponing of the event really sort of turned out well. Seeing that there were high-level speakers at the event from the US, from the UN, private sector, Hollywood, Kenya, you name it. So that was really good to see. At times it felt a little bit like a French party, as we say in Dutch, but of course it was Generation Equality Forum Paris. So in terms of the challenges, I think Mori already mentioned quite a few and very important challenges also for the Netherlands. We were really outraged to hear about the youth representatives being asked to leave the forum after day one. I think I saw a lot on social media with "we're not a photo op," and that was really, also in terms of non-English speakers, there were a lot of technical issues with the translators as well. Access for people with disabilities. So these were really issues that we're very concerned about, and also something that we will address. Of course, as the Netherlands, it's really important to continuously reflect on the importance of meaningful youth participation, being inclusive, and also for us, this really, again, is an opportunity to learn from this, reflect on this, even though, of course, we're not the organizing committee, but we will discuss this at DG level even this week with France, and of course also with UN Women. We also saw, talking about UN Women, and this is especially in Action Coalition 6 that we've experienced, but we've also heard it from other colleagues in the other Action Coalitions, that there was quite a tension in terms of UN Women really clearly trying to maintain a tight control over the development of the draft plans, and at the same time demanding that the Action Coalition leaders would step up and take responsibility. So that was a bit of a tension there. And you all know, I think we discussed last time, a lot of insecurities, a lot of last minute communication, and of course the technical issues. So that in terms of the challenges, but let me move to sort of from our, I think this session is called the government perspective. So for the Netherlands specifically, we tried everything we could to get our Prime Minister on stage in Paris. But as you've all seen, we did not succeed in that. Unfortunately, you know the situation in the Netherlands with the caretaker government, current coalition formations taking place. Our minister has 2, probably even 3 hats on. So there was no participation by the Prime Minister or our Minister of Foreign Affairs. We also saw that even though as the Netherlands, we had one of the highest commitments in terms of a commitment of over $500 million US, or in euros, 510 million euros to the SDG 5 fund. We saw that it was more attention was being paid to those countries, those commitment makers that were committing a fraction of that, but had ministerial presence during the opening ceremony or any of the live events during the 3 days. Of course, we were very happy that we were able to sort of show the good example of meaningful youth participation. We had our youth ambassador for SRHR, gender equality and bodily autonomy, Linde de Pachter, who shared the time together with our deputy DG, Brigitte Tazelaar, during the Action Coalition 6 session on Friday. And not only was she a speaker during that action coalition, but also the one on SRHR and bodily autonomy. But maybe not all of you know that behind the scenes, Lisa was the one within the ministry who was coordinating our efforts within Generation Equality Forum, which was fantastic to see. We're all extremely grateful and proud of all her amazing efforts. Unfortunately, she can't be here today for a very good reason. She is enjoying a well-deserved holiday, so she sends her regards. So maybe just to recap from the government side, we've made 17 commitments in 5 out of the 6 action coalitions. The one on technology, we did not make any commitments. And out of those 17 commitments, 9 are international collective commitments in collaboration with other stakeholders. So this is especially the case for the action coalitions on SRHR and feminist movements and leadership. So unfortunately, none of the side events where a representative from our ministry we were supposed to speak were accepted, but of course we still participated virtually in several sessions, starting with Action Coalition 6 on feminist movements and leadership, for which the Netherlands is one of the leaders. And we're very proud of that. Of course, we continue to advocate for more political and financial support for women's rights organizations and movements, activists, women rights defenders in the Global South. And we committed our entire SDG 5 fund to this action coalition. And also domestically, it wasn't just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that was involved, it was also the Ministry of OCW, who made some domestic commitments related to the statutory quota of at least 30% of the women who should be in supervisory boards of listed companies, and also to aim for gender diversity in the top management of semi-public and the public sector. I think one of the added value for us, because as I said, we're at the moment we have a caretaker government, so all of our commitments were based on existing policies, existing contracts. There's no new money. But what was really next to all of the sort of showcasing of the work that we do, advocating for feminist movements and leaderships, support to women's rights organizations in the Global South, we were also able to commit to the collective commitments under AC6. Which also, for example, included practicing feminist principles within our own organizations. So within this AC6, our Deputy DG, together with Lisa, took the stage and really stressed the importance of partnerships with young feminist movements. And Lisa, in that session, also called upon everybody to join and really take a stand for women, girls, and the LGBTIQ community. So the other action coalition where we participated was the one on bodily autonomy and SRHR, where through a video message, Pascal Grotehuis, our ambassador for gender equality and women's rights, together with Lisa, our youth ambassador, shared on behalf of like-minded governments a commitment to work together with IPPF to realize 50 million more adolescent girls and women having access to SRHR and services by 2026. Now, one of the maybe for you unexpected sort of presence of the Netherlands was in an international ISO standard for gender equality. So quite sort of at a short notice, we were approached by France if we wanted to join this session together with Mexico on a proposal that the French Institute for Standardization submitted to ISO to have an international standard on gender equality. And of course, this is something we very much support. It's not something that the Dutch government decides over. It's a vote by the Netherlands Standardization Institute, the NEN. And we also very much stress the importance here of making sure that within this further development of the ISO standard, we take into account the equal rights of LGBTIQ people, including non-binary gender identities. So some of the other events that we participated in, one was prior to JEF on June 18, our ambassador Pascal Grotehuis, together with Delphine O, the Secretary General of JEF, and Anne Bernes, the Swedish ambassador for gender equality, participated in a What is Feminist Diplomacy in Action event organized by the European Council on Foreign Relations. And we also saw that during the forum, even though the Netherlands doesn't have a feminist foreign policy yet, we saw that it was mentioned several times. For example, during the launching of the Global Partner Network for Feminist Foreign Policy, it was our friend Theo Sowa who also said that the Netherlands is an example leader, that even though we don't have a formalized feminist foreign policy yet, we are a true feminist leader. And also in a session on leading from the South, there was a lot of appreciation for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a leading from the South program and partnerships. So that was really great to see. Now, in terms of the follow-up, of course, this was the launch only. It feels like quite a delivery. I'm sure all of you are still recovering from Jeff Mexico, now Jeff Paris, but this was just the launch. Now, the acceleration plan for the next 5 years will really start to be implemented. So UN Women will coordinate annual reports on the Global Acceleration Plan for Gender Equality. And of course, from our side, we'll be following up with reporting on our commitments. And also, we will stress the importance of a follow-up of Jeff. One of the things, we are one of the ones that took the initiative together with Canada and many other civil society partners for the Global Alliance for Sustainable Feminist Movements. So this is a co-creation process that will now take place between now and hopefully the launch will be International Women's Day 2022. Also, of course, there's the Compact on Women, Peace and Security that had over 100 signatories, and Netherlands is one of them. But I believe that Anne Floor will say more about that. So just to wrap up, Yvonne, I do see time's up. Maybe just to say that one of the things, of course, Generation Equality Forum was a voluntary forum. It was up to UN member states, civil society, private sector to make commitments or not. Not all UN member states participated in Generation Equality Forum. This was also chosen because of the backlash against women's rights and gender equality. And the advantage was that it really allowed us to use very ambitious language. If I read that blueprint from our Action Coalition, it makes me extremely happy and proud to see such an inclusive and diversity of language, which is something with all the UN member states, yeah, at this point, we would not have accomplished that. So that's great to see. Of course, on the other hand, because there is no political declaration, there is no signing by all UN member states, we can't hold all of them accountable, only the ones that made commitments. We already see that, for example, the Russian Federation is already trying to block references to Generation Equality Forum in the UN Women Strategic Plan that will be discussed in September. So these are worrying developments. And of course, from our side, we will very closely follow up on Jeff Paris. And the important question to all of you is, yeah, how would you like to see the follow-up? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karin. And it's great to see the number of commitments the Netherlands made to the different action coalitions and the active follow-up and the ambition to go towards more, yeah, I would say feminist diplomacy, feminist leadership. I think feminist foreign policy, which I think is great. Let me introduce our next speaker, which is Paulien Boone. Paulien is the Lobby and Advocacy Coordinator at CARE Netherlands, and CARE International was in the leadership group of Action Coalition 2 on economic justice and rights, an action coalition with heated debates about private sector especially. Please, Paulien, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's great to be here. And first of all, I would like to echo some of the things that were already being said. That yes, it's a great moment to strengthen global efforts for gender equality, and at the same time, there are these massive challenges ahead of us, and a bit of frustration of the process so far. I would like to first give a very brief introduction about CARE and our considerations for writing a letter of intent and the priorities that we wanted to bring to the table. Second, as you already mentioned, you asked to also reflect on the discussions taking place around private sector involvement, specifically in the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights. And lastly, some overall reflections I must say personally, I was involved last year in CARE's development of the letter of intent before the deadline. And of course, it took a very long time to get clarity on whether we were going to be selected or not. And then, of course, we were faced with the pandemic and the delay of the process by a full year. Over the last months, I have not been as personally involved in the Action Coalition development, but thanks to the fact that we are a confederation, I have been able to speak with various colleagues who have been personally involved to get a better understanding of that process. So to start with the CARE's role, as I mentioned, CARE is a confederation active in around 100 countries around the world. And CARE Netherlands is a member, and the Confederation was selected to join the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights as a co-lead and as one of the largest NGO representatives across all Action Coalitions working in that capacity. Gender equality, as you may know, is also central to CARE's Vision 2030. It's a central element in all that we do. And therefore, it makes perfect sense for CARE to pursue a role as a co-lead in the Action Coalitions. So we wrote a letter of intent to do so back in the winter of 2020. And we chose the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights based on where we would be of most added value, given our expertise, our programs, and the possible commitments that we would be able to make. We have a long background in working to support and develop village savings and loans associations that support women in their development and economic independence as well. And part of our pitch for being a co-lead was that CARE could also create space for other organizations, civil society organizations, to be part of the space and to ensure that smaller women's rights organizations, feminist organizations, and women-led organizations, including our own partners, would be better able to access the process and any potential opportunities flowing from it. So we entered into this to ensure that the process is inclusive and creates opportunities for many others to participate, while also delivering real progress on gender equality. And COVID-19, of course, delayed that process by a full year. And looking back, I think indeed it only has increased the importance of and urgency of acting on gender equality, and making sure that the damage that's being done to all that has been achieved is not only repaired, but also that we push for better outcomes over the next few years. On to the private sector involvement. As I mentioned, the process started in 2020, and for us ourselves, it took a long time to get clarity on whether or not we had a chance of being selected. And that was already an unclear process, really, to understand what our chances were and where the process was in terms of next steps and announcements. In general terms, CARE itself is open to working with the private sector and to work together with businesses, given their scope and reach and how they're able to reach many of the people that we are trying to serve. They are huge stakeholders in how the world operates, and we feel that they are necessary partners to work with. Of course, there has to be a good fit, and we're also, as an organization, taking into account due diligence concerns, and we feel it is of critical importance to retain the space to also be a critical friend when we're working together. So that's where CARE's general position is on that. Well, in the context of the Action Coalitions, it took a long time for all stakeholder groups to get selected as co-leads, as I mentioned. And based on our standing, we were convinced that private sector involvement is relevant and important to achieving the type of results that are necessary to achieve the ambition of the forum. As Karin already mentioned, a large part of the funding, for example, was coming from private sector and philanthropy. as one aspect of their relevance. That being said, the process has shown the challenges associated with bringing together such a diverse group of stakeholders around these global challenges. There are huge differences in size, in objectives, in priorities, financial means, and influence between all involved in the process. And meaningful inclusion of all stakeholder groups and their perspectives that they bring to the table is a critical element in such a process. And for example, we are in an action coalition that also includes the Gates Foundation, to mention one, which is of course a huge stakeholder in this process. And there have been tremendous efforts throughout by stakeholders from all over the globe. And given these efforts and the process that had already been underway for quite a long time, it's really unfortunate that private sector partners were selected and involved at a very late stage. And co-leads in particular, the ones who had already been quite engaged in the process, they would have appreciated and to have been better informed or perhaps consulted even about the selection process of private sector partners, also because the Action Coalition was already well underway. And of course, UN Women as a convener had a critical role to play in ensuring that type of transparency throughout the process. I'm not sure if there's anyone from UN Women in the room, but I'd be very interested to know how they reflect on that, given the discussions that took place in this Action Coalition. In the meantime, my colleagues were very aware that as representatives of an INGO, they also had the opportunity and the responsibility to serve as a bridge between all these different stakeholders, between member states and UN Women and civil society, women's groups, youth organizations, and to bring all those voices to the table. And also involve CARE itself. I mean, we're a large organization and only a few colleagues were immediately involved in the process. So they were also forced to share deadlines that were not the types of deadlines that we'd like to share internally, saying, please respond within a day, because that's when we need to get back to this process. And also there, it's just really important to make sure that every voice can be heard and has a chance to also share what their perspectives. But my colleagues did really try and ensure that we serve that role also towards all the different organizations involved in this Action Coalition. So, for example, they delivered a joint project on unpaid care. It was developed jointly with CSO and youth group leaders. And it shows, it's one example of how an Action Coalition can actually run inclusive processes and consultations and also achieve joint influencing with impact. So we do think it is possible. It just needs to be improved here and there to make sure that we take it from here. Indeed, it was a launch, this Generation Equality Forum. It's not an ending. And we feel it's really important to take it from here, to take stock, maybe take a bit of rest now that we're only a few days after the Paris Forum, and then ensure that we share lessons learned and feedback across all stakeholders and make sure that we improve where necessary. But overall, of course, the accountability framework is still missing. And I think what's much needed is an overview of the commitments that were made. We cannot just learn that from listening into the replays or the meetings that took place and just taking notes. We need a proper overview of all the commitments that were made and how we can hold each other to account. And an important aspect there is to have a better understanding of how commitments are going to change the work that we are all doing, and the shifts that organizations are making towards a more gender equal world. So to sum up, as an organization, we're happy that lots of our priorities are reflected in the final program of work. And we remain committed to the process and to the action coalitions. And we want to make sure that the commitments are actually brought to life by all, and that we have the tools and the position to hold each other to account. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paulien, for this interesting contribution. And I think at the end you raised a very important issue about accountability, and which I think is a really difficult subject when talking about private sector and philanthropy. How can we hold them to account? And I would advise people to read the post of Greenpeace of this morning, but that's on a different track. The final contribution of today comes from Anne-Floor Dekker, the Program Manager on Women, Peace and Security of Women Equals Men. We'll speak about the Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action. Please, Anne-Floor, take it away.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, so I'm the Program Manager Gender, Peace and Security, that's Women, Peace and Security. I'd like to give you an update on the launch of the Women, Peace, Security and Humanitarian Action Compact that happened on the 2nd of July during the Generation Equality Forum. And I'll just call it the Compact because the title is so long. To explain a bit more on the Compact is a global movement which calls for the redesign of peace and security and humanitarian processes to systematically and meaningfully include women and girls in the decisions that impact our lives. And this includes, of course, peace builders, but also refugees and other forcibly displaced and stateless women and girls. The Compact was initiated by civil society organizations worldwide that back in 2019, when the 6 action coalitions were, well, not launched, but it was clear that there would be 6 action coalitions during the Generation Equality Forum, that we were worried that there was any attention for women in conflict and youth in conflict. So we really felt that the Women, Peace, Security and Youth, Peace and Security agendas would be overshadowed during the Generation Equality Forums. And therefore we really pushed for a extra coalition, in the end that became the Compact on Women, Peace, Security and Youth, Peace and Security. And I think it's a really good thing that also the Humanitarian Action Agenda was coupled to that agenda. The Compact builds on really existing commitments and resolution and international treaties on women, peace, security and humanitarian action at the global, regional, national and local level. We don't want any extra agendas because there's already so many resolutions and treaties perfectly writing down what should be implemented. At this point and during the 2nd of July, there are, as also Karin mentioned, over 100 governments, United Nations, entities, civil society organizations, academic institutions, and also private sector groups that have signed on the Compact. And this includes the Netherlands, but also, for example, Ireland, Norway, Sierra Leone, Uruguay, the United Kingdom, the US, but also the Women's Refugee Commission, the Feminist Humanitarian Network, PAX, FOND, and the African Union Commission's Office on the Special Envoy on Women, Peace, Security. By joining the Compact, the signatories pledged to 1, strengthening coordination on existing mechanisms for women, peace, security, and humanitarian action. 2, improving monitoring of progress, and 3, an increased financing and visibility of the Women, Peace, Security, and Humanitarian Action agenda. And more specifically, signatories are committed to take concrete actions for women and girls in 5 key areas. And these key areas were identified by the Women, Peace, Security, and Humanitarian Action Compact catalytic members and board members that are kind of overseeing the governance of the Compact. And these key areas are increased financing for women, peace, security, and gender equality in humanitarian programming, meaningful participation in peace processes, economic security and access to resources, leadership and agency, and protection and promotion of women human rights in conflict and crisis. And maybe interesting to give a bit more detail about what the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which of course Karin already knows, has committed to. As we've seen via Twitter that there's 2 commitments being made. So first, advocate with conflict parties to ensure delegations include women and prioritize their rights. And second, encouraging and support the nomination and appointment of women as mediators, as special representatives and as special envoys. Women Equals Men, as a catalytic member, we also signed up to the compact, and we committed to contribute to the design and implementation of campaigns that promote equitable, progressive social norms, attitudes, and behaviors towards women and girls and include leadership of women, and collecting evidence and engaging in advocacy to hold duty barriers and individual perpetrators to account for women's and girls' rights violations. And that was also based, so these commitments of Women Equals Men are really based on consultation and also discussions with our members. So we'll remain in the following years, of course, also a catalytic member of the compact, also being in this role, maybe say the same as Karin is in the role of the other action coalitions as a critical friend. So we really want to be critical on if indeed all signatories strengthen the coordination and monitoring and financing of the full women, peace, security, and humanitarian action agenda. That is at the same time also a challenge. We see it as really a challenge that now we have this compact and we have a lot of signatories, but I think the challenge is really that signatories should not see the commitments as the only parts of the women, peace, security, and humanitarian action agenda to implement, but they really use it to strengthen their advocacy also towards other member states and other institutions to implement the full women, peace, security, humanitarian action agenda. So that is something that we, as Women Equals Men, see also as our task to really follow up on and monitor that. I think that's it for now, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Anne-Floor. That's a very interesting compact, I would say, and great that Women Equals Men is so involved and that the Netherlands committed to it. I saw that there are a lot of questions and comments in the chat already. Please keep contributing for the next part of our session. And then I would like to hand over now to Nadia van der Linde from Women Equals Men. Please, Nadia, for the Q&A and discussion.
Yes, thank you very much. So thanks to all the presenters so far and Yvonne. We have the next half hour to use for some of the Q&A and opportunities for others who may have participated in the process or in the meeting itself last week to also share some of their reflections and learning. I have collected a number of questions that have already been raised, and I'd love to share, first of all, a couple of questions towards Karin Weber of the Ministry. First of all, a question around your reflection on the political buy-in around gender and empowerment here in the Netherlands. So what do you experience and what do you also expect as key barriers and opportunities for moving forward on gender equality and women's empowerment? There was another question around whether organizations can still join the Global Reference Group for the Global Alliance on Sustaining Feminist Movements, which Karin presented also as one of the key commitments and follow-up that the Netherlands will be part of. And there was also a question raised around why the Netherlands did not make any commitment in the area of Action Coalition 5, for example, around online violence, which was also a point that was raised and addressed within the Commission on the Status of Women this year in March, and the role of technology in online violence, which of course we've also seen quite a lot of recently here, also within the Netherlands and with political figures. Perhaps we'll start with that, and after that I'll have some other questions as well for the other presenters. Thank you, Karin.
Thank you also for reading out the questions, because unfortunately with the security issues at the ministry, we need to use Zoom on our phones only, so I can't see chat. So thanks for that. Gosh, that's a big question in relation to political buy-in and key challenges here in the Netherlands. I think in terms of the collaboration between the different ministries in the Netherlands, this is very good. And in some sense, of course, any disadvantage has its advantage. Because of the global pushback against women's rights and gender equality, the collaboration amongst the different ministries has really increased significantly over especially the past year, but even the previous years. Also with our National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, there's been a lot of collaboration between the different ministries who co-created also, of course, together with civil society, the National Implementation Plan. And the pushback that we see within the European Union also meant that we had to much more closely collaborate with the different ministries, our attachés in Brussels, to really have a response in terms of the pushback against the pushback together, also of course with our like-minded colleagues. So in terms of the political buy-in, I think you also see it within Parliament. There's a lot of questions, and rightly so, being raised by members of Parliament on developments, very worrying developments that are happening in countries like Hungary and Poland, and what our response is as the Netherlands government. I think you've all seen our Prime Minister on TV after the Hungary announced the legal actions they're taking against LGBTI. So this has all meant that in terms of, I think, gender equality, you also see it on the multi-party initiative that exists in the Dutch parliament, that this is really a topic that from left to right to center is something that people have on their agenda. So in that sense, I think the biggest challenge that we've had around Generation Equality Forum is that everybody is very much motivated, wants to move forward, but because of the current status of our caretaker government, we couldn't really come up with any new commitments. So that's been a challenge. And as I mentioned, because of the current formations, also availability of our Prime Minister and Minister has been limited. The question on the Global Alliance on Sustainable Feminist Movement, if you can still join the reference group, I believe so. There was a Google document that was being shared where you could sort of sign on, and it's still active. This was just sort of the launch during Jeff. So I can share that again. And yeah, there will also from AVID, a part of the Count Me In consortium, of course, is very active in this global alliance. And they are planning to hire a consultant who will kind of guide us through this whole co-creation process. So once this person is hired, further information will also follow. And then why did we not sign on, or why did we not make any commitments on AC5 on technology? It's a very good question. We, in terms of the violence against women and girls and sexual and gender-based violence, we've made commitments under that action coalition, also both online and offline. We considered making a commitment in relation to the gender digital divide, but because we're still internally developing policy on this, we couldn't make the commitment at that stage, at this stage. Thank you. Back to you, Nadia.
Thank you so much, Karin. Yeah, there's still a lot happening and a lot about to happen. So we'll definitely be following up on this process. Women Equals Men is a strategic partner of the Count Me In consortium, which is also part of the leadership of the Action Coalition 6, and with AWID in the lead for that, part of that global alliance on sustaining feminist movements. So as I just also shared in the chat, if people want more information or updates specifically on that, or interested to know how to join that process or what the options are for engagement, I can update you as well, or help find out what we need to find out. there were many questions and awesome comments to you, Mori from Choice, about your presentation, and a lot of compliments about the amazing graphics that you showed. And a lot of interest to learn more about what can all of us really learn around how to better engage young people in such processes. So it's great that you already mentioned that you're developing some kind of guidance from your learning of organizing that on-conference, but perhaps there are already some key pointers in relation to, some key elements, some key principles that we should all take into account when we're thinking of creating spaces together with young people or ensuring youth participation in our spaces.
Yes, thank you. So definitely we will be developing and sharing a little manual or toolkit with going deeper into this information. But I think mainly the success of the Young Feminists on Conference was the fact that it was an on-conference. So this format is participant driven. And like you said, creating these spaces together with the young people, and also not seeing young people as an homogeneous group, so addressing the needs of different young people from different places. And mainly, we're thinking about how to change methodologies, because in most meetings and forums, youth feel more like being informed or briefed instead of being consulted and working together. And that's why we didn't have any sort of expert panels at the conference. The methodology was really developed in a co-creative manner, offering spaces for personal reflection, for sharing, and for co-learning. And then as well, some other points that are already present in the Young Feminist Manifesto. So I can share the link to that. And there's already lots of recommendations there that we took forward during the Young Feminists on Conference. For example, when developing documents, not only asking young people for feedback, but that young people actually co-develop the documents, having an exchange of vision, ideas, suggestions. Then also thinking about timelines, exactly, that timelines can be also youth-friendly for being able to have the youth consultations, and mainly creating an enabling environment where young people can feel safe and that our ideas can thrive. So thinking how to transform these spaces, including other creative tools and methodologies, and thinking on the power dynamics and the power imbalance that most forums and conferences have. And in most spaces that claim to be participatory, it was 2 hours of someone speaking and then 10 minutes for questions and comments. And we believe that that's not engaging and that's not participatory, and it's even tokenistic. So what I can do is share now the link to the Young Feminist Manifesto that has already lots of these recommendations, and then we will move forward and share how we develop the methodology for the Young Feminists on Conference.
Thank you so much, Mori. I think there's a lot we can all still learn and improve on that. For me and several other members also in this forum, thanks so much for the initiative that was taken to constructively live stream some of the sessions to increase accessibility, which definitely was a key challenge last week. In terms of accessibility, I also just want to highlight that several groups of people with disabilities also organized shadow sessions around the Generation Equality Forum, and on the first day to really highlight the problems that they've had to access the process of the Generation Equality Forum, and the way that the online space was created, where they really explicitly did not cater for needs such as sign language and other needs that they had highlighted already beforehand to the organizers. There were definitely some other examples as well of resistance and protest, although it's such a different reality to organize online as opposed to physically in person, like some of us have been able to do in previous years. So the resistance is often in the form of different statements that were shared or different hashtags like Give Feminists the Mic that were used around the opening ceremony, where there was frustration that it should be really more people from civil society and more activists having the word, and that the balance between speakers from the global north and global south was off. So thank you so much, Mori. I see also the Young Feminist Manifesto is now in the chat. I want to just check also to see if there's people that want to raise a question or share some of your experience or insights or commitments with everybody here. Feel free to raise your hand within Zoom. I will do my best to give you the floor. At this point, I do not see any hands yet. So I will go to another question that I have, which relates to what Paulien mentioned around the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and the role of the private sector. But really, any one of the presenters is invited to share any thoughts they might have, which is around the role of the private sector, of companies within these processes. UN Women has been publicly sharing quite strongly how they feel, they've created a good practice here with this multi-stakeholder process. But in reality, we already heard from Paulien as well, some of the challenges around the engagement of the private sector and sort of how these processes have not always been very transparent or very collaborative. I wonder, Paulien or any of the other speakers, whether you'd like to say anything more around the role of the companies that were engaging in the processes that you may have engaged with, and both, the opportunities that you might see or the good experiences that you might have, as well as the challenges that are real.
Well, I suppose as a large organization, large CSO, we felt a bit, as I suppose, caught in the middle in a way, trying to work with all types of stakeholders, with UN Women, with the member states, with the private sector, and trying to ensure that that everybody was being heard and committing to all of the blueprint and not just specific sub goals or projects that they were already working on. I think that was one aspect of ensuring that that any serious involvement, for example, as a co-lead, is making sure that they're contributing to, that they're also making that shift, that they're doing more than they used to do. We cannot achieve gender equality if we continue doing business as usual. And I think that goes for all stakeholders, but perhaps even more so for the private sector, that anyone who would be joining would be making that shift. CARE itself is also doing so. We have commitments, of course, to the process and to also doing better as an organization. And that is a central element of anyone who contributes to this. And that's why accountability is so critical in this process, to make sure that we know exactly who is committing to what and how we can hold them to account. And that's why I'm really hoping that we will soon have a complete overview and that we can compare the different commitments and how they are different from what an organization is already doing.
Thank you, Paulien. I know that, of course, the private sector has been part of all the different action coalitions. So I just want to give an opportunity also for any of the other speakers, except for the compound though, right? For any of the speakers to add anything if they wish. All right, then I'd love to give Alexandra Pittman the floor.
Yeah. Hi, thanks so much, everyone. This is a really just useful conversation. And just to give a bit of a perspective, I straddle both worlds. So I've been a feminist evaluator, and that's how I started my career, working with different foundations, UN agencies, international NGOs. I started out actually at AWID in the feminist evaluation and where's the money's work. And over the years, after about 10 years, built a feminist tech company, Impact Mapper, to track and visualize social impact and really make use of qualitative data that's often missing, because we really need to be lifting up and leveraging stories of change, voices from women themselves, and then actually translating those into outcomes. So we've built a tech tool in this space to help to do a lot of this mixed methods work that's missing in the sector. I think just having been sitting in many different positions over the years, from the kind of feminist evaluator activist perspective, working with donors, thinking about how we track impact at portfolio levels, and then getting granular about communicating research and data for advocacy. One of the things that I'm often seeing missing in the space in the conversation when we are funders or supporters of these rights is actually who are we choosing as providers, tech providers, and do they align with our values, and are they helping us to move forward to make the sort of change that we really want to see in the world? And I think that's something where this can be a really collaborative space for building tech that works for everyone, right? And leveraging some of the amazing new possibilities here, and maybe not choosing, the big corporates always just because they're the big corporates and it's easy to, to select that. And of course, I'm a bit self-interested here, I'll be honest, right? I'm a startup feminist tech founder building a product for the sector. But this is kind of the reality that I struggle with, to be quite frank, as we're trying to build something for the field, is how do we get enough buy-in and enough people in the same space using the same tools so that we can build that political power together. So I think that there's some really interesting, and we know there's a lot of fascinating conversations around AI and tech. There's and a lot of possibilities that can be opened up as well. So we're working with, we've gotten some funding from NVF to support this project. Maybe some of you have seen this. To build the evidence based on feminist movement building. You can check out our site, impactmapper.com. The program's ongoing. We're helping to communicate the stories of impact for feminist movement building organizations and show what happens when you fund in a decade-long approach. What happens when you take this long-term perspective, because we're off track as a sector funding in the short term and measuring just numbers, right? We can't continue that. So we need better ways to track the data. We need better ways to communicate information and to mobilize. So we're certainly here as partners in this process. We'd love to talk to anyone else who would like to support us in this initiative, also who would like to give data or share the survey with their organizations, so that the donors and the grantees that you're supporting, so that we can really gather the biggest evidence base on women's movement building outcomes, so that we can really start showing what happens when you fund in a bold, transformative, long-term way. So really happy just to be here, to be part of the conversation. I know I've been trying to reach out to some of you on LinkedIn to see if there might be some interesting synergies, but please connect. I'd love to chat more.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. I think you raised a lot of really crucial points. There's a follow-up question for you in the chat around whether you're using open source and open standards, which you might be able to respond to in the chat.
Definitely.
Excellent. I think there's indeed still a world to gain when it comes to tracking impact, as well as in relation to accountability. Right, I know that I participated in a discussion session last week during the Generation Equality Forum around accountability for this process, where there's still a lot, a lack of clarity really around how everybody, all these commitments, how that will really be tracked, and how different organizations and governments and other actors that have been engaged will actually be monitored and held accountable for the commitments they're made. I was wondering actually, Karin, if there's anything more that you know around accountability and the role of the action coalitions on this. I think you mentioned that you and women will have sort of an annual process of reporting. Is there anything you can clarify around that?
I wish I could say yes, but no. No, I know UN Women, yeah, they mentioned annual reports and then kind of not focusing on all of the commitments, because of course there are so many, but really sort of the major commitments by Action Coalition. I know that they're the ones who are going to coordinate from the Secretariat, and then we'll request all of the commitment makers for input. But I think also, as some of the other speakers said, that I think a very basic starting point needs to be the platform where we can actually access the commitments from everybody easily. I think some of our commitments are under the title of Israel, and yeah, it's a bit messy to say the least. They have talked from UN Women's side when we asked multiple times about this accountability framework, how is this going to work, that they want to work with indicators, baselines, targets, both quantitative as well as qualitative, but this hasn't yet been sort of further communicated how exactly they want to see this take shape. So at the moment, no, I believe we have a check-in next week. So if there's any more information to share, I'll do so.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karin. Anna Flora, you had a hand up. Feel free to share.
Yes, thank you. Maybe additional to what was said previously, for the WIMP Security and Humanitarian Action Compact, there was already some discussion on a framework and also what kind of indicators should we report on. And I think that one of the key lessons learned of developing also the National Action Plan on WIMP security, and I feel that the compact is kind of mirroring this process, is that you need to have this, and everyone who's working on monitoring, evaluation and learning knows this, you have to have this framework in place already before you launch any compact or action coalition. So I think that is really a failure of all of us being in leadership positions right now, that we haven't pushed for that more, as now it will be very vague for everyone where to report on. And I also kind of fear that there will be this kind of second rounds of lobby against too much reporting and against too much of, pinpointing what we should also publish, for example. So I think it would be, as to kind of counter lobby, I think it's really important for all of us that are in these leadership positions. So Women Equals Men in the WIMP Security Humanitarian Action Compact, but everyone who is in some kind of leadership position in the action coalitions, to really push for public reporting. And that we also have space as civil society to discuss these reports. So it's not on the report, it's really on discussing the progress that we are making. So I think, yeah, that's kind of a call to all of us to make sure that these reports will be public.
Thank you, Anna Flora. And I think this brings us really nicely into sort of the plan ahead, right? What kind of opportunities for our advocacy, for our work, for really moving forward, for making some progress on actually getting some transformational, sustainable change for gender equality, for women's rights, for SRHR, for economic justice. So we need working on that accountability process and framework and collaborating on that. I see Paulien from CARE also mentioned in the chat a comment that it would be great to continue this conversation as stakeholders in the Netherlands together, so that we can also check out together more around progress, around accountability, around strategic opportunities and advocacy that we can do. I actually, we are nearing the end of our discussion process. I just want to make sure that all the speakers or anybody else who would like to add something to the conversation around what do you see as opportunities moving forward, right? What do we need to, what do we need to take into account for the advocacy and the work that we can do to move some of these commitments and really to move gender equality and women's rights forward? Has this GEF process that, although it has started quite a while back, really, keeps being promoted now as sort of, this is just the start of it. What can we do with this? How can we use this? How can we see opportunities from this process to really move things forward? So I just want to give the floor to the various speakers to just very briefly say anything that you are thinking of in terms of moving forward from this JAF Paris forum. Mori, is there anything you'd like to say on this?
Yeah, I also definitely think that this is the start, and the importance will be that to keep the movement going and not just stop as, well, this forum passed, let's move to something else, and see how we can work together and really create the spaces where everybody is taking into account and have youth engagement of people with disabilities, young feminists, and see how we can make this really transformative and participatory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mori. Karin, is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. I think, first of all, hold us accountable as the Dutch government on the commitments that we've made, including the collective commitments. Keep us sharp on the meaningful youth participation, inclusiveness, diversity. So yeah, very much agree with the proposal to keep this conversation going. At the moment, we're also in the middle of the Human Rights Council these weeks. In September, we have the General Assembly coming up, the third committee, of course, looking later in the year, 16 days of activism. So a lot of very important processes are also coming up. Maybe if I may, take this opportunity to also let you all know that we'll have a new head of the Gender Equality and Women's Rights Taskforce starting in September, Karin, who will be joining us from the current permanent representation at the EU. So she'll start in September, and in the meantime, Tijmen Rosenboom, the current ambassador for youth employment and education, is our interim head. So just as a sort of announcement, and of course you've probably all seen on social media, we're very proud that our own former ambassador to Greece, Stella Ronner, is now the special advisor on gender and diversity to the Secretary General of the EU External Action Service. So these are also, in terms of lobby and advocacy, I think important things to know. But yeah, next to holding us accountable, also once we have this clear, friendly to use overview of all the commitments, I think it would also really be great to, together with civil society partners, private sector, and our embassies, to hold the governments accountable of those countries who have made commitments. Thanks.
Thank you, Karin. We definitely intend to do so, yes. Paulien, is there anything else you would like to say as a final statement to share?
Well, indeed, mainly, as I said already in the comments, I would love to continue the conversation and continue sharing information between us, because it's clear to all that this process hasn't been always easy to understand and easy to navigate. And I think we need to support each other where we can to make sure that we are all engaged and that together we really make a dent. So would love to continue in some form. Thanks.
Thank you, Paulien. And a quick shout out also to some of the comments that have just been mentioned by Irina in terms of making the link with climate justice and upcoming conferences, the COP26 and the CSW in the coming year, as well as Jan Reinders around men's engagement in these processes and some of the highlights from his experience last week. Finally, on the floor, is there any final comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, maybe that is also something that Arushi is mentioning in the chat. I think it's really important that now we have kind of a common ground as gender movements and feminist movements. And I think the next step is really to hold that common ground, but also to use it in this whole pushback against women's rights and gender equality. So it's really about accelerating the agenda, right? It's not about, you know, holding the red lines. Please let us not only hold the red lines and also accelerate the agenda. So I think that is the second step that we need to take. So how to use also, for example, the Compact on Peace, Security and Humanitarian Action to ensure that other member states that are not a signatory, that there will be a signatory, become a signatory in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, on the floor. This has been an amazingly engaging process. Yvonne, I'm handing it back to you for some final words.
Thank you, Nadia, for moderating this Q&A and discussion. I think we had a very rich discussion actually during these last 1.5 hours. I think we clearly saw the value of youth-led action. And I really liked what Mori said about the technical issue is also a political issue and something I should keep in mind myself too. And well, also the fact that there's still a lot needed to actually get to proper, meaningful and inclusive youth participation. The commitments and the feminist diplomacy of the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I like to commend that, and the commitments made, and also the idea to have this ISO standard on gender equality. I think this is something we as advocates should take forward and should make sure that this standard is indeed as inclusive as possible and the process as participatory as possible. The importance of working with private sector. And I think despite all concerns, you know, one way or another, we have to make sure that we hold the private sector also to account. And it's showing that a multi-stakeholder forum and multi-stakeholder working sounds nice, but it's definitely not an easy job to do. And I think on the floor, you spoke about the strengths of civil society, actually. Saying, you know, civil society taking the initiative to work and strive for getting this compact. And I think which got a huge traction throughout the Generation Equality Forum. And I think that's a huge compliment. And looking forward, I think the importance of tracking impact of accountability. I think it was mentioned a number of times, the pushback. In order to address the pushback, I think it's important to have this proper accountability framework and to have public reporting actually to be able to show proudly where we are heading towards. And I think I want to conclude with actually the necessity to work united to address the pushback. And I think that's something which I think is of crucial importance because the opposition is acting united. If we don't, if we, you know, focus too much on the little things which divide us, I think we might lose ground. We have common ground now. Let's use that. I want to thank Nadia. I want to thank all the speakers of today on behalf of ShareNet, on behalf of Women Equals Men, Choice for Youth and Sexuality, and my own organization, Rutgers, who actually pulled this session all together. A big thank you to all participants for being with us, for all your active contributions. Have a nice day, stay safe, and I hope our next meeting will be a live one with plenty of drinks and coffee and whatever, so that we can catch up. Looking forward to meeting every one of you in person again soon. Okay, stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.